In 1902, a defining moment unfolded in Edgar Cayce's remarkable career. A desperate couple approached him with their 5-year-old daughter, whose grim diagnosis of a terminal brain injury left them seeking a miracle. Contrary to medical assessments, Cayce discerned that the true issue was not in her brain, but her spine. He suggested a simple yet unconventional treatment, a spinal adjustment. Within months, the girl defied all odds and made a full recovery. This case not only cemented Cayce's legacy as a medical clairvoyant, but also underscored his broader abilities, including his uncanny knack for predicting major historical events. Half a year before the stock market crash in 1929, Edgar Cayce advised his friends who invested in stocks to sell them. Those who didn't listen ended up losing their money. In 1931, he forecasted that the global economy would bounce back by spring 1933, which it did. Then, in January 1934, he foresaw Hitler's rise to power in Germany. Hitler indeed became the Führer later that year in August. Cayce also mentioned that Hitler would stay in power until a war from outside would overthrow him. In 1935, he predicted the start of World War II, envisioning an alliance between Austria, Germany, and Japan. But he also said the war would involve many countries and that the U.S. would join in 1941. Cayce also predicted the deaths of John F. Kennedy and Franklin D. Roosevelt, as well as civil and racial unrest in the U.S. during the 1960s. In 1938, he spoke about finding parts of temples under the sea near Bimini, off Florida's coast. He suggested this could be the rising of Atlantis in 1968. Sure enough, 30 years later in 1968, the Bimini Road was discovered in the Bahamas. Cayce described Atlantis as an ancient civilization as large as Europe, with advanced technology which he said disappeared in the Atlantic Ocean about 10,000 years ago due to a massive flood. This ties in with the flood myths present in many civilizations, which often date back 10,000 years. Among his most striking predictions was that the 44th President of the United States would be African American, a prophecy fulfilled with the election of Barack Obama. In his later years, Edgar Cayce made a chilling prediction about his own death. He prophesied he would be buried in 4 days, a prediction that came true to the day, adding a final eerie note to his extraordinary life. Among Edgar Cayce's most alarming visions were those predicting future global disaster. He foresaw a series of events that would reshape the Earth's geography and climate. Edgar Cayce made some big predictions about how the world map will change. He said that Africa will split into 3 parts because of a new waterway forming as the Nile gets wider and the Red Sea grows. This will make Cairo disappear under the sea. Asia will see huge changes too. The ocean will cover land from the Philippines to Japan as the Pacific Plate moves. Japan will mostly sink, leaving only a few small islands, and Taiwan and most of Korea will be lost to the sea. China's coastline will move inland a lot. He also said people in India shouldn't try to go to higher land inside the country because the land will buckle. They should go to the high mountains in Tibet and Nepal instead. Antarctica will change from being icy to green and fertile. Australia will lose about a quarter of its land to flooding, turning the Adelaide area into a sea and making deserts like Simpson and Gibson into farmland. New Zealand will get bigger and connect to Australia, becoming one of the safest places. Europe will face big changes too. Most of Northern Europe, including Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Denmark, will sink and become many small islands. A lot of the UK, from Scotland to the English Channel, will go under the sea, but some small islands like London and Birmingham will survive. Ireland will almost totally disappear except for some high land. Russia will get separated from Europe by a new sea formed by the merging of the Caspian, Black and Baltic seas stretching to Siberia. Russia will become Europe's main food supplier. In Canada, the coastline will move in by 200 miles, and regions like Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and parts of Alberta will become safe places for refugees. The North American plate moving will create new islands off California's coast, almost 150 of them. The west coast will shift east towards Nebraska, Wyoming, and Colorado. The Great Lakes and St. Lawrence will join up and flow from the Mississippi River to the Gulf of Mexico. The coastal areas from Maine to Florida will be flooded, and Mexico's coasts will be underwater too. The Baja coast of California will turn into a bunch of islands. This huge change will displace and even kill billions of people. In the quiet rural lands of Kentucky on the 18th of March 1977, a child was born into a humble farming family. This child, Edgar Cayce, would grow to become one of the most puzzling figures of the 20th century. From his earliest days, Edgar was no ordinary child. While other children found joy in play, Edgar was drawn to the mysteries of the Bible, where he constantly seeks answers in the ancient texts. The woods in Kentucky were a special place for young Edgar. He said he met little folk there, beings that were more like spirits than people, similar to fairies from old stories. At the age of 11, an extraordinary event occurred. In these woods, Edgar encountered a winged woman, a vision that would shape the course of his life. She asked him what he desired most. Edgar's response? To help others, particularly sick children. Edgar had trouble at school, which made his family worried. His dad was really upset when he found out Edgar wasn't doing well in school. After his dad scolded him, Edgar lay down and heard the voice of the winged woman in his head. She told him to sleep with his head on his books. When he did this, he found out he could remember everything in the books when he woke up. There was a time Edgar got hurt at school, hurting his back so badly that he couldn't move part of his body. This made everyone in his family very sad and worried. One night, while half asleep, Edgar said the recipe for a medicine made from herbs. His parents decided to try this medicine. The next day, Edgar was all better, like he had never been hurt. Motivated by this belief, Edgar began to offer psychic readings, primarily focusing on individuals suffering from illnesses and injuries. People had different thoughts about Edgar Cayce's predictions. Some thought they were like a sneak peek into the future, full of big ideas, but others thought they were just lucky guesses, or just Edgar using his imagination. Even with these different opinions, Edgar's predictions made a big mark. They led to lots of books, groups, and many people who really want to understand his way of seeing the world and what might happen in the future. Nowadays, experts in different fields study Edgar's work. They're trying to figure out if he was connecting to something big and shared by everyone, or if he just had a really special way of thinking. Edgar Cayce is a real mystery in history. He went from being a regular farm kid to a famous person known for seeing the future. His story makes us think about what people can really do and the mysteries that we haven't figured out yet. As we finish talking about Edgar Cayce, we think about how his story still grabs our attention. Was he someone who could see the future, an imaginative person, or something else? His story keeps making us curious and keeps people talking, making us wonder about all the things we don't know. In a recent podcast, Stanford neuroscientist Andrew Huberman said something shocking about God. And just take a look at this. I'll just go on record. I'm very comfortable saying it. I believe in God. I do. I think there are many things that science can explain. There are certain things science can't explain. But I'll even go a step further, which is that all the elements of science are entirely compatible with the idea of there being a God. Yeah, you heard that right. A neuroscientist confessed his belief in God. But wait, what led a respected neuroscientist to embrace faith and engage in daily prayers? How does his belief in God align with his scientific pursuits? Could there be scientific insights within religious texts that resonate with Huberman's expertise? Make sure that you stick with me right until the end to find out exactly why God is real according to neuroscience. Andrew Huberman, a prominent figure, dropped a bombshell by openly sharing that he is a believer in God. Now rewind just a decade or so, and such a confession from a credible public intellectual would have been deemed unimaginable. Back then, the world of science and atheism had this sort of tag team dynamic, making it challenging for someone to openly embrace both science and faith. The prevailing sentiment was that Darwinism and the Big Bang had seemingly cast aside the need for transcendent explanations of our existence. Science and atheism were often seen as inseparable, and this notion intensified even before the new atheists took this stage with their assertive arguments. Fast forward to today, and there is a subtle but significant shift in the scene. Huberman's openness about his faith daily prayers and diving into the Bible challenged the historical trend where science and atheism held hands in the public arena. The landscape is changing, breaking away from the notion that scientific minds must inherently reject the spiritual, and the lines between science and spirituality are becoming more fluid. It's intriguing to witness this transformation. Once upon a time, the idea of a scientist openly professing belief in God might have raised eyebrows, but today it's becoming a more acceptable narrative. The era where science and spirituality stood as adversaries is evolving into a space where they can coexist, and Huberman's candid admission signals a shift, a recognition that the human experience might be more than just a sum of biological parts and cosmic explosions. And this is where it starts to get really interesting. When you start to study and understand brain development as I did, or neuroplasticity, or dopamine, you have to. Meaning, I don't care if you're an atheist, agnostic, or believer in creator, you have to step back and just go, wow. In the fascinating world of science and spirituality, Andrew Huberman takes on a journey where the boundaries between the two blur. He kicks things off by recognizing that science is fantastic at explaining many things, but there is this realm of mysteries that it can't crack wide open. And guess what? It's his fascination with the incredible intricacies of the human brain that got him to believe in God. As a neuroscientist, Huberman has dived deep into studying how our brains grow, change, and respond to things. From studying how brains grow to the flexibility they show, and even digging into the wonders of dopamine, he's had some mind-blowing revelations about the world. Now here's the twist. Huberman isn't alone in this belief adventure. Huberman points out that some big-shot scientists like Einstein and Carl Jung also had a soft spot for the idea of a higher power. It's not just about test tubes and microscopes, it's about connecting the dots between science and something beyond them. In Huberman's world, science and religion aren't playing hide-and-seek. They're more like a dynamic duo, each enhancing the other and bringing something unique to the table. It's not science versus religion. It's science and religion, a tag team of understanding our complex world. This is where things take a turn. Now let's dive into the mind-blowing world of the human brain and Andrew Huberman. According to him, our brain is like a superhero with unmatched powers. He wants us to take a moment and think about all the incredible things our brains let us do. Not just walk and talk, but think, create, and imagine. Huberman throws out this idea that if we compare ourselves to other creatures on Earth, our brain game is on a whole different level. Huberman's big point? We humans are in a league of our own when it comes to brain power. He paints a picture of the brain as the ultimate multitasker, allowing us to pull off a crazy range of moves and thoughts that no other species can match. Think about it, chatting with a friend, inventing cool stuff like Tesla cars and spaceships, all thanks to our fantastic brains. But it gets even more shocking than this. Just take a look at this clip. You know, I absolutely pray. I absolutely love that the idea, but also what for me is really a deep belief, which is that we can't control everything. We're not in as much control as we think we are. And that the magnificence of biology and the magnificence of nature is, it's impossible for me to conceive how that could come about any other way. It just is. Moving on, let's now take a peek into Andrew Huberman's life, where he spills the beans about his journey with prayer. Growing up in a family with different religious flavors, Huberman has been weaving prayer into the fabric of his life since forever. And guess what? For him, prayer isn't about asking for the latest gadgets or scoring a touchdown. It's more like having a heart-to-heart with a higher power, whoever or whatever that might be. Yep, for him it's not about controlling everything, but about finding a peaceful corner in the chaos. Coming from a scientific background, Huberman believes that prayer is a way of recognizing the limits of human power. It's his go-to method for feeling a connection to something bigger than himself, something that made the incredible world of biology and nature. But that's not all. When he was questioned more about prayer, Huberman came back with his incredible response. And you know, this is going to sound weird, and probably people are going to be like, "What are you talking about?" If you're going to say, It works. It works. He spills the beans that, for him, prayer is like a spiritual phone call, connecting him to a higher power and acknowledging that we are not the bosses of everything. Why does he do it? Well, Huberman spills some wisdom, sharing that prayer is like putting a magnifying glass on the beauty of biology and the jaw-dropping wonders of nature. Imagine standing in awe of a beautiful sunset and thinking, yup, that's got to be a creator behind this masterpiece. Well, prayer in his eyes is like a humble nod to both our smallness and the grandeur of the universe. So here's the lowdown on how Andrew Huberman sees prayer. According to him, it's not just about talking, it's also about tuning in and listening. And you know, I've learned, and I certainly try and do this, that a lot of prayer is about listening. And a lot of prayer is about you ask for things or listen for things, and then an hour later, 2 days later, you go. Now here's the thing. Don't expect instant miracles because it's not a quick fix. You might not see immediate results like magic tricks. Instead, he compares it to hitting the gym. Just like working out regularly builds up those muscles over time, sticking to prayers and diving into the Bible can lead to some serious personal and spiritual growth. You're not just asking for stuff, you're also keeping your ears open for wisdom. And even if you don't get a reply from the universe right away, Huberman thinks there's a kind of spiritual growth happening behind the scenes. So in Huberman's mind, prayer isn't just a one-time thing. It's a journey of listening, learning, and growing. But this is where things get even more mind-blowing. Andrew Huberman also opens up about the power of prayer, revealing that it became a crucial anchor during the challenging times of losing 3 mentors, each to different circumstances. One grappled with a profound struggle of suicide, while another faced a relentless grip of cancer. I mean, I would just mention that I've had 3 amazing scientific advisors. You know, Harry shot himself. 2 weeks after I told him we published a paper in Science, he said, "Come on down to Santa Barbara, it'd be great to take you out for pizza and celebrate." 2 weeks later, he ate a bullet in the bathtub. Barbara died of cancer when she was 50. I'm friends with her daughter. I saw her. She did have those 2 kids. One's a neuroscientist at McGill, and she was like a mom to me. She died. I was speaking at her memorial. And then my postdoc advisor died. He was a pretty impressive guy in his own right. In the face of such profound losses, Huberman found solace and meaning through the act of prayer, which served as a guiding light, offering him a perspective that transcended the immediate pain. According to Huberman, prayer wasn't just about seeking answers, but also about recognizing a broader design at play. Even if he found himself tempted to overlook it, prayer offered a reminder that there is a purpose woven into the fabric of everything. In the face of tragedy, he discovered a source of strength to carry on by embracing the notion that, despite the pain, there is a plan unfolding. All right, now let's dive into Andrew Huberman's take on how things work in the spiritual realm. He's got this cool idea about cause and effect, and it turns out that it aligns with what you might find in some ancient writings. According to Huberman, God often gives people a little instruction manual, sort of like a guide on how to live life. He points out that if you follow the guidelines like being patient, being kind, and all that good stuff, there is a promise that good things will come your way. It's like a spiritual cause and effect. Now, he's not just talking about reading these instructions. He's saying that by really diving into God's Word, you can see some amazing changes in your life. Huberman is also all about encouraging folks to get personal with the divine. How? Through prayer and studying that guidebook, the Bible. He's like, hey, don't just take my word for it. Try it out in your life. It's like putting God's teachings to the test and seeing if they really make a difference. But here's the challenge. It's not a one-time thing. Huberman draws a comparison to hitting the gym again. Just like how you won't get those biceps by lifting weights once, you won't see the full impact of spirituality without some consistency. He encourages folks to get hands-on with God's teachings, to test them out in their lives, and to see the positive changes. But here's where things get more intimate. Just take a look at this. To really serve, like I really see myself as serving higher power. Like I'm a conduit, right? Now, Andrew Huberman's openness about his strong belief in God is turning heads and sparking a wave of hope. In a world where science often takes center stage, his openness about faith is like a breath of fresh air. It's not every day that you see a scientist stepping into the spotlight saying, "Hey, I believe in something bigger." Huberman isn't just talking the talk, he's walking the walk, and he's got a big dream: to see a new generation rise up with faith. He's buzzing with excitement, believing that embracing faith can be a game changer for individuals and society as a whole. It's like he's passing on the torch saying, "You guys, there is something incredible waiting for you on this journey of belief." Huberman is also encouraging everyone to toss aside any preconceived ideas about God and dive into the uncharted waters of prayer and spiritual exploration. It's like an open invitation to embark on a quest where you might just uncover the transformative power of God and the awe-inspiring beauty of spiritual existence. Huberman doesn't see science and faith as locked in an eternal tug-of-war. No, he's just showing us that there is this beautiful space where belief in God can comfortably coexist with our scientific curiosity. It's a reminder that our exploration of the universe doesn't have to exclude the possibility of something greater. Huberman's also not just about preaching. He's sharing the positive vibes that he's experienced. His journey of weaving prayer into his daily life is like living proof that a bit of spiritual practice can have some awesome benefits. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing. It's a personal journey that he's sharing with a nod to the potential perks of embracing the spiritual side of life. So as we navigate our own winding paths, Huberman leaves us with a golden nugget of wisdom. Stay open-minded. The possibilities that stretch beyond our scientific know-how are vast and exciting. It's like he's reminding us that in the realm of spirituality, there is always more to discover.